Hello class. For today's lecture we will be discussing the topic of monopolies, how they come about, their effects on society and how the government plays a role in monitoring them. So, we'll begin our lecture by looking at market failures. A market failure occurs when the market fails to allocate resources efficiently. Basically it is evident if firms have control over price, if products aren't the same but are rather differentiated, and if the market is pretty much controlled by the firms that have market power. In other words, a market failure exists in an economy of imperfect competition. So what is a monopoly? A monopoly is a firm that is a single seller of a product without close substitutes, and as a result of a monopoly, the supplier can determine the price, meaning it's usually higher than a more competitive market structure, allowing them to earn ridiculous supernormal profits and leading them to produce a lower output and a lower choice or range for customers. So, a prime example of this is with Microsoft Corporation, where they produced their own operating system, Windows, which accounts for 82% of their market. In this case, Microsoft is referred to as having monopoly power. The main reason for monopoly is due to barriers to entry. So, the stronger the barrier, the harder it is for a firm to enter. There's four main sources of barriers to entry. The first being when a key resource is owned by a single firm. The second being when the government gives a single firm basically the exclusive right to produce some good or service. Also, when the cost of production make a single producer more efficient than a larger number of producers, and when a firm can gain control over other firms in the market and grow externally through acquisitions, mergers or takeovers. So let's look at the first example and take an easy one to start off. Say we were all living in a nomadic lifestyle. We all were living with no houses, water supplies, and there was one well on the island of Ireland. And say if I owned that one well, I would have monopoly power over that one well. However, having said that, in the economic world this is unrealistic, and even though owning an entire key resource is a potential cause of monopoly, it's a rare case, and actual economies are very large and resources are shared, and this is made even easier with things like international trade. So the second, governments may basically restrict entry by giving a firm the exclusive right to sell a particular good in certain markets. This might be due to the fact that it could be viewed to be in the best public interest. So for example in Sweden and Norway, the retailing of alcoholic beverages is carried out under a state-owned monopoly in the interest of public health, due to basically just to look over and monitor the sale of alcohol, and this can be achieved through the issuing of copyrights and patents as a means of ensuring property rights. So a natural monopoly, the next one is achieved through massive economies of scale, and it's really only enjoyed by the biggest firms in the market. For example, ESB Gas in Ireland, which was also referred to as a vertically integrated monopoly, because it basically enjoyed a monopoly across all aspects of its industry. So for example, it owned all production, all distribution, and met all the demands of the consumer needs. So many of the largest firms in the world have grown partly due to the fact that they have acquired or merged or taken over other companies or other firms, and as they do so, the industry basically becomes a lot more concentrated, and as a result governments have to monitor these acquisitions and takeovers and mergers. So for example, Bayer is buying Monsanto in a $66 billion deal, and another interesting kind of acquisition I think it was when Mercedes joined up with merger was when Mercedes joined up with Swatch to create the smart car. So basically, when monopolies occur, the firm charges a higher price to the consumer. This is referred to as the welfare cost of monopolies, and is undesirable to the customer yet very desirable to the firm. The question revolving around the welfare costs of monopoly is whether or not it's possible to have a scenario where the benefits to the firm owners exceeds that of the cost to the customers, and this question can really only be answered through the analysis of total surplus. So if we take a look at our graph here, we have our demand curve, D, and we have our marginal cost curve, MC. This point of intersection leads us down to the efficient quantity, and basically any quantity sold less than this in this region here is more beneficial to the consumers or the buyers, as the demand curve represents the value to buyers. So this can be clearly illustrated in the fact that this line travels higher to the demand curve than it does to the marginal cost curve. and vice versa on the right hand side, where it's worth more to the producers, we can clearly see it's higher to get to the marginal cost curve. Moving on, so basically, because a monopoly sets its price above marginal cost, it creates like a gap between the consumer's willingness to pay and the producer's cost, and this gap causes the amount sold to be less than the social optimum. And the downside or inefficiency of monopoly is seen when the monopolist produces less than what's known as the socially efficient quantity of output. So, so basically, when a monopolist charges a price above the marginal cost, some potential customers value the good at more than its marginal cost, but less than the monopolist's price, and as a result, they don't buy the good. Another concept is the deadweight loss, and this is a problem that arises basically because the firm produces and sells a quantity of output below the level that maximizes total surplus, as seen in this graph here, which I'll show you now. So we have our let's write this out. We have our marginal cost line and our demand line. But if we were to add in now our marginal revenue line, which would be something like this in the average industry, this area in here represents our deadweight loss. So that's it in a nutshell. So on to the next topic. Mixing these up. Price discrimination. So price discrimination in its simplest form basically means selling the same good at different prices to different consumers, even though the costs are all the same. Price discrimination is not possible when a good is sold in a competitive market, because there's so many firms that are all selling at the same market price. In order to price discriminate, the firm has to have some sort of market power. So we're looking at a definition here. Perfect price discrimination refers to the situation when the monopolist knows exactly how much each customer, well, more realistically, each kind of segment of customer is willing to pay, and can therefore charge each segment a different price. So an example of this will be with quantity discounts, which involves charging alternate prices to the same customer for different units that the customer buys, and this can be seen with the Irish Times, who charge the working man a higher price than it would charge students. The two most important effects of price discrimination are the fact that it can increase the monopolist's profits and reduce the deadweight loss. So the next topic now, the government. So the government's role in monopolies. The government have different ways to increase competition, because that's their goal at the end of the day, and to reduce the rise of monopolies by using competition laws. So they can prevent mergers, and they can also break up companies. And basically, in summary, competition laws prevent companies from undertaking activities that make markets a lot less competitive. For example, antitrust law and antitrust policy give governments various ways to promote competition, as does competition legislation. So this can be seen in the example of the water, electricity and gas industries and companies who are not allowed to charge any price that they want, because the government agencies regulate their prices, and this can lead to the turning of some private monopolies into public enterprises, but we'll leave that for another day's work.